Urban Forest Voices. Come on in to the city forest with Secret City Arts. I'm Pin Stockman, storyteller and story maker.
And I'm Mandy Ross, writer, poet and counsellor. Together we're exploring the whispers and connections between trees and humans in our cities.
Welcome to this episode, which is all about planting trees. We're kicking off with a very special guest, the wonderful and brilliant Bernadette Russell.
Hello, my name is Bernadette Russell and I'm an author, playwright, performer and spoken word storyteller. I'm also a volunteer tree planting supervisor for Trees for Cities. And even though I live in the middle of London, I spend a part of each day amongst the trees. I feed wild birds who now recognise me and follow me to the park, and I even have an adopted street tree I'm looking after. It all began back in 2018 when me and Gareth Briley were writing an audio story walk about the history of our local area, which is Deptford in southeast London, for local theatre company Teatro Vivo. The story walk was inspired by John Evelyn, a 17th century diarist who loved green spaces, clean air and trees. So an oak tree, a plane tree, an ash tree and a rowan tree ended up being the narrators of our story. It was fun discovering their personalities, and it seemed perfectly correct that they delivered the stories of the local area, for it's the trees that have been around the longest and seen it all. At the same time, I was introduced to Trees for Cities by my local park group, Deptford Folk. I planted my first tree in the Pepys estate, and the rest, as they say, is history. With Trees for Cities, I've planted and helped others to plant a lot of trees since. Like many places, London has lost trees to disease, development, disregard or accident, and Trees for Cities have done amazing work in planting more than 1 million trees, so many that now London is designated a forest, according to the United Nations definition, which states that a forest is anywhere that is at least 20% trees, and London is 21%. On planting days, some people have told me that they plant trees to remember loved ones. Others told me the trees they planted reminded them of home, and others told me of plans to come back and visit the trees to see how they were getting on. I've seen neighbours meet each other for the first time whilst planting trees together. It's community building, and a really good workout too. Alongside and intertwined with tree planting, I've deepened my nature-inspired storytelling. And I don't think for a moment that we're the only ones that tell stories. I mean, I can't prove it scientifically yet, but I'm pretty certain that crows, bees and mice tell each other stories, and trees pass on stories too, via their mycorrhizal network, broadcasting via mycelium, passing on nutrients and tree tales too. Tree planting has taught me lots of things, including this, that in the green spaces of our cities is everything we're looking for. We don't need to go further afield to find wonder, magic and wildness. It's right here, with our tough little squirrels, foxes, crows, rats and pigeons. It's with the dandelions that grow in the cracks of the pavements, in the buddleia that finds a home in the old broken wall decorated with graffiti, in the eels and crabs of our ancient sacred rivers. It's easy to find hope in the resilience of nature all around us. And in these spaces we have the chance to be quiet and still, to disconnect from the sound and fury of the digital world and to enter the green world, noisy with chirping birds and rustling creatures, with busy insects and weather. And here are a couple of invitations. First, go to the nearest green space and let your imagination fly. Consider the world from a more than human perspective. Imagine what it would be like to fly like a sparrow, to be able to hear as well as a deer, to see in the dark as well as an owl, to walk as quietly and carefully as a fox, or to be as patient as a tree. And 2, plant a tree. It will be the best thing you ever do. If it thrives, it will provide home, food, shelter, refuge for insects, birds and animals, help cool the land, gift us beauty, prevent flooding. All you really need, as my friend Seb, veteran tree planter, once told me, is to dig a hole and get planting. Easy. And pretty miraculous. Planting trees and storytelling have many things in common, including this. As a story grows, it passes through time from person to person. And as a tree grows, it passes through time also. And all being well, just like the story, that tree will outlive us all. Before I go, I'd just like to leave you with these beautiful words from poet Khalil Gibran. Trees are poems that the earth writes upon the sky.
Street orchard. Forest street. This story is inspired by an old traditional tale that appears in many cultures. It was told informally during City of a Million Trees picnic workshops in Spark Hill Park and at Edgbaston Reservoir to invite new creative work. The first part of the recording is the story that was told, and the second part weaves together the different creative responses. Part 1. Once there was an old man who lived in a neighbourhood where the trees were few and far between. So one day he started to plant young trees, saplings, all along the street. Some were placed in big containers. Others were planted by the side of the road, where the concrete paving slabs had fallen into disrepair. It was hard work. The next afternoon, some people stopped to watch and asked what he thought he was doing. And so he told them that he planted a street orchard, a forest street. And some people smiled, but others laughed at him. "What's the point? It'll take years before those trees are big enough to give fruit or offer you shade. You're not likely to get much benefit from all this hard work." But the old man smiled and leant on his shovel and explained that he wasn't planting the trees for himself, but for the next generation. And he looked at the children and he told them it was for the birds that were still in their eggs, for butterflies that were still hungry caterpillars, and for all the creatures that would one day take shelter under the branches or make their homes down at the roots. And then he looked back at the adults and finished. "These trees are not for me. They are for your children and their children. After all, we borrow the earth from those who are yet to be born." At the end of the story, people were asked, "What would you plant?" And so the second part of this tale is woven from those gathered words and ideas. Part 2. And the street orchard blossomed and bloomed, with cherry and elderberry, fig, apple, peach, pear and plum, sometimes sweet and sometimes sour, water, rain and sun. Breathe in, breathe out. Trees to sit under on a hot summer's day, chatting and sipping tea with friends. And their voices mingled with the wind and the whisper of leaves on the trees, planting hope and possibility, planting hope and knowledge, planting hope and a place to live, planting. The children chanted as they watered and fed the trees. A conker tree, a climbing tree, a jumping in the autumn leaves tree, an abracadabra beautiful tree with so many leaves to hang over me. And the forest street grew, and one day the trees were big enough to climb. So that's what their children did, and their voices mingled with the wind and the whisper of leaves on the trees. What should we plant for the future?
Hello, this is Mandy Ross. I'm the other half of Secret City Arts. I'm a writer. The darkest days of winter is the time for planting trees, for putting down roots to get established in the darkness of the soil, ready for the days to start lengthening and the green shoots to start emerging in the light. Recently, I took part in an interfaith event with asylum seekers. There were 80 of us, of different faiths and none, coming together to plant a little fruit orchard on the edge of a park. There were 30 asylum seekers, roughly, families and young people. Many of them had left villages in hills and valleys far away, and they were ready and willing to get to work, digging and planting. And you could see that many of them were familiar with this kind of work from back home. It was a chance for Muslims and Jews and people of different faiths and no faith to come together, to work together outdoors, to put down roots, to plant some peace and hope in difficult times. The rabbi told an old Jewish story, which she said was familiar in many cultures, and you might know it, about an old man planting a fig tree. They asked him, "Why are you planting a fig tree at your age? You won't live long enough to eat the figs." And he answered, "As others planted trees before me so I could enjoy their fruit, so I'm planting for those who come after me." 3 of the asylum seekers were translating into their own languages, and you could see a ripple of recognition as the story unfolded, obviously a familiar story. And then Yusuf, the caterer, who'd prepared an outdoor picnic to share, and he himself is a refugee from Syria, and he's set up a local business offering Syrian food. Yusuf said, "In Islam, we are taught if you're planting a tree and Judgment Day comes, first finish planting your tree, then come to Judgment Day." And then the rabbi said, "That's the other Jewish story I was going to tell." It's so good to have a chance for Muslims and Jews and others to come together in these difficult times. And it got me thinking about how trees feature in many religions, the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden, the Bodhi tree in Buddhism and Hinduism. Perhaps you can think of other examples. I've been thinking and writing about what trees mean to us in the city, in all our different faiths and none, what they represent, what the trees stand for as they stand beside us, among us, through our lifetimes, beyond our lifetimes. City Trees by Mandy Ross. Root and wood and leaf and seed, reaching, budding, blossoming, falling between brick and concrete, glass and steel, through rain and drought and heat and storm. Root and wood and leaf and seed, marking boundaries, edges, landmarks, playgrounds for dogs and squirrels, birds and humans, shading picnics, trysts and quiet places. Root and wood and leaf and seed, witnessing all our anniversaries, sheltering the baby's first journey home, brushing the top deck windows on the bus, all the school days, weekdays, workdays, standing by our trips to and from the hospital. Root and wood and leaf and seed, all our childhoods, teens, adulthoods, aging, all our graves and scatterings, all our lockdowns and back to normals, all our dark nights and relief at dawn. Root and wood and leaf and seed, rain and drought and heat and storm. It's no wonder, really, is it, that trees feature in stories and in all the faiths, and in our secular lives too, in the city, how each of us knows a landmark tree, a favourite tree, a tree that holds a memory. I wonder if there's a tree that stands beside you. through rain and drought, and heat and storm.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find information about Urban Forest Voices in the show notes.
Urban Forest Voices has been made possible thanks to funding from Arts Council England.